Thank you for viewing Introduction to Genealogy, presented by the East Baton Rouge Parish Library Genealogy Department. My name is Lee Bareford, and today I'll be introducing you to the basic steps in the genealogy research process, acquainting you with the type of records that you'll be using, and giving you an overall better idea of what to expect as you begin your family history research. We'll accomplish several objectives today, so let's take a look at a list and see what we will accomplish. Today we'll define genealogy, which has a definition that's a bit more broad than one might expect. We'll learn how to organize and conduct research. We'll review the various types of records used. We'll explore the East Baton Rouge Parish Library genealogy databases, so you'll be able to take your research online using computers. We'll consider common research pitfalls, and finally we'll outline the genealogy resources that are available to you here at the library. Let's start with a definition of genealogy. In its most basic form, genealogy is a line of descent traced continuously from an ancestor. You'll track one of your ancestors backwards through time and establish the facts of their lives. But there's a second definition of genealogy that's a bit more broad and encompasses the overall history and context of a land and its people. That definition is the study and tracing of lines of descent or development. As you research your family's history, you won't just gain the facts of their lives through records, but you'll piece together a narrative or story about their lives set against a backdrop of the history of the area in which they lived. In order to establish your family's history, you'll need to conduct research. Genealogy is a cycle of research, and it starts with reviewing what you know about your family. You may have stories that have been passed down through your family's oral tradition, or you may have collected artifacts from your home or the home of family members that prompt you to ask questions about your family. Once you review what you know about your family, the next step in the genealogy research cycle is to decide what else you want to learn about your family. You may know nothing or little about your family beyond your parents or your grandparents and may want to fill in the details of your larger family tree, or you may want to know the story about one particular person in your family and try and get a detailed view of what life was like for them. Once you decide what else you want to learn about your family, you'll need to familiarize yourself with the records that are available. There are several types of records that are available to you as you research your family's history, and some records may be more appropriate or more informative at a certain point in time than others, depending on what questions you have about your family. The more you know about the types of records that are available and how to read those records, the better equipped you'll be to answer the questions that you have about your family. The next step is to learn how to utilize library resources and able to locate the records that will fill in the details of your family history. There are a lot of resources that are hidden away on our shelves or in computer databases that we can help you locate, but as you learn how to find those records in the library collection, you'll be better equipped to advance your research to the next level. Once you find some details and information in records, you'll need to evaluate your findings and develop new questions. This is the beginning of a new cycle in the genealogy research process. Collect all of the information and ask the questions who, what, when, and where. What details did you learn in your research? What does the record in front of you communicate about your family? What other records might you use to fill in other details in your family history? As you ask those questions, you'll need to go back and once again review what you know about your family after conducting research, and the genealogy research cycle begins anew. How do you find your ancestors? The first thing you'll do is research records using the East Baton Rouge Parish Library resources. We have two main types of resources. The first are computer databases, including Fold3, Family Search, Ancestry.com, Newsbank, and others. We also have print resources available to you, including books, vertical files, which include research from other families across Louisiana and the Gulf South. We have microfilm collections of special records. We have maps and a lot of other things in our collections that can be helpful to you. Which records will you use during your research? At the most basic level, the federal census records are the most valuable and informative to the beginning genealogist. The U.S. Census was enumerated every 10 years starting in 1790. Census records are the genealogist's most valuable resource. They offer a comprehensive view of members of a household every 10 years back to 1850. Prior to 1850, only the head of household was listed by name on the census. All other family members or residents of the house were listed in statistical categories reflecting their gender or their age. All but a small fragment of the 1890 census was accidentally destroyed by fire in 1921, so that's really the only census decade that isn't available in its entirety. Federal censuses were conducted in each state after the date of statehood. So in Louisiana, for example, the first federal census was conducted in 1820. The next type of records that you'll be using are vital records, which comprise birth, marriage, and death certificates. Vital records is a blanket term for birth, marriage, and death records. Marriages were recorded in church parish books for a long period of time, but official government-mandated birth and death certificates were not required until the 19-teens in most states. For example, birth and death certificates were not implemented in all Louisiana parishes until about 1918. Although marriage records are generally accessible to the public, birth and death records are protected by privacy laws, which differ from state to state. Access to vital records can be limited as a result of these laws, and again, those laws will differ state by state. Military records are also a valuable resource for genealogists. They cover wars all the way back to the American Revolution and sometimes before that, and you'll also find records accessible to the public up through the Vietnam War. Some of the most common military records that you will encounter during your research are World War I and World War II draft cards. The Selective Service required all eligible males to register for the draft, including older men and younger men. Younger men would fill out their draft card for military service abroad in foreign wars, whereas older men would fill out selective service cards for domestic service during wartime. So you can find information in draft cards for all different types of age ranges of your ancestors. You'll also encounter cemetery lists, headstone applications, and burial records. These records are valuable because they can give you information about ancestors who died prior to the standardization of death certificates. Cemetery lists in particular can help you make family connections because they list possible family members buried in adjacent plots. These records may be official, such as military veteran headstone applications, or unofficial, such as lists of cemetery burials compiled from tombstone inscriptions. They are found in books and also online. Immigration records are a valuable resource for families whose lineage started in a foreign country. The United States was a melting pot and remains a melting pot of different cultures who traveled to this country to become American. American immigration records date back to 1790, but passenger lists exist for voyages as far back as the 16th century. At different times, immigration laws changed, but basically an immigrant would file a declaration of intent to become a U.S. citizen when they arrived in the country. Then they would satisfy a resident requirement, which ranged from 2 years to 5 years at different points in American history. Finally, they would complete their naturalization papers to gain citizenship. Naturalization papers are valuable because they include detailed genealogical information, such as persons or the applicant's family members, but also they include photographs, which can be excellent if you are researching family members who you may not have actually met during your lifetime. The next set of records that you will encounter are church records. Before vital records were required by law, church parishes or dioceses were the primary custodians of birth, marriage, and death records. Louisiana maintains extensive Catholic Church records from the colonial period to the early 20th century, but records for other religions such as baptism, Methodism, Presbyterianism, and other religions are also available. The types of church records available will differ from state to state depending on which religion was most prevalent in that state. As you encounter records, it's important to question which resources are more valid than others and which have the weight of authority versus more speculative contents. That brings up primary versus secondary sources. Primary sources are records that were created at the time the events happened. They are often created by public or religious figures such as clerks of courts, judges, priests, doctors, etc. Secondary sources are collections of information that are compiled from various primary sources after the events happened. Secondary sources might include recollections rather than documented facts. Census records fall somewhere between primary and secondary sources. They reflect households as they existed on census day, for example, but the person who answered the census enumerator's questions may have intentionally or unintentionally provided inaccurate information. For example, a male head of household may not know exactly where his wife's parents were born and vice versa. So census records are neither primary or secondary sources, but should be viewed with speculation and confirmed by comparing them to other sources. Some examples of primary sources are birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, ship's passenger lists, military records, and church records. Secondary sources include vital records indexes, which are compiled from different registries, whether it's a clerk of court's office or whether it's a records repository in a Department of Vital Records from state to state. Those records can be transcribed into lists, and that introduces the possibility of human error. Somebody transcribing those records may skip a line or skip a name, and details will be left out of those indexes, rendering them secondary sources. Family histories are also secondary sources because they include recollections that may not actually reflect the facts. Tombstone inscriptions are also secondary sources because tombstones will decay over time. Exposure to the elements will wear down the inscriptions on tombstones, and a family may decide to replace a tombstone at a certain point in time, at which point they'll have to re-inscribe that marker with details that may or may not reflect the facts. General histories are compiled from primary sources, so you need to check the bibliography of the author and make sure that their sources are verified in primary documents before you accept them as facts. Oral histories, once again, include recollections. It may not include the exact details of a person's history. And translated records may include errors. They can be translated from primary sources written in other languages, and of course that introduces the possibility of human error and distortion of facts. Once you establish which sources are the best for your research, you'll be exposed to a lot of different information. Primary and secondary sources are available everywhere, and as you conduct your research, whether it's in the library using books and microfilm or online using a computer database, you're going to generate a considerable paper trail. It's important to organize your research with charts and forms which help you track your family's history in an organized way. Ancestry.com has a public link to charts and forms that is available in the library or even at home without a subscription to Ancestry.com. We see a screenshot on the left of some of the forms that are available at Ancestry.com, and we have some examples here that we can look at. Pedigree charts are probably the most familiar records in the genealogy process, and simply multiple tiers that track a family through time. This is an example of a pedigree chart at Ancestry.com, and as you can see, it starts either with you and your parents and grandparents on the paternal and maternal side, or either the most recent ancestor that you're tracking. Obviously, you'll track more generations in your family history than the ones outlined on a single form, so you'll want to extend your family's pedigree chart beyond one page. As you can see, you can add different charts and number them, and then label which chart continues the particular line that you're tracing. The family group sheet is another useful form which allows you to track a family's development over time. Family group sheets are good resources because you may see changes in a family from one census to the next. A family group sheet will allow you to track those changes. This is an example of a family group sheet, which you can see gives you a lot of information about a family, including all of the details of the husband and the wife, including maiden name. Occupations are reflected. Other wives and other husbands are listed on the form as well. And then you have a spot that lists all of the children or residents of a household at a given time. As you access different census records, you see children gradually age and leave the house and get married on their own, or you may see children die young as a result of fever or other things that contributed to infant mortality. And so you can track those births and deaths over time, even before vital records were required, by tracking a family on a family group sheet. Other forms offered at Ancestry include a research calendar and a research extract, and both of those forms allow you to track the sources that you consult during your family history research and keep yourself organized so you don't repeat research, or you know which sources to revisit as you continue your research. This is an example of the research calendar, and as you can see, it has a column for the date you access a source. If you access it in a library, it has a column for a call number or microfilm reel number. The description of the source should include the title and the author, and then you can list what time period you're researching and the family surname that you're searching. As you expand your research, you'll be researching multiple lines of your family at one time, so being able to track which names you're researching at which points in time will allow you to go back and revisit the records that you've consulted to see if you can mine them for further information. The final column lists the results that you achieved when consulting the source, what information that you found, and as you go back and consult this research calendar, you can see if you've already checked for marriage dates, for example, birth or death dates, and see what information you need to revisit that source in hopes of acquiring at a later date. A research extract gives you more detailed information about a source that you can consult. This is an example of a research extract, and as you can see, there are two research extracts included on a single page. A research extract will give you a more detailed description of the source that you can consult, whether it's indexed or not, which means does it have an index of family names or is it cataloged within a library collection? What is the condition of the source, whether you have to ask permission to access it, as in some archives or special library collections, and also the date during which you accessed the source. Once again, there's a place for time period and name search, but there's also another line for a search objective. What information were you hoping to find, and did you find it? If you didn't necessarily find the information you were looking for, what clues did you acquire during your research? Is there any information reflected in that search that may give you further information about your family at another time? Ancestry offers other forms beside these four available on their charts and forms page, so I encourage you to take a look at Ancestry and see what's available to aid you in organizing your research. You may find it helpful to start a 3-ring binder and insert divider tabs that reflect the surnames in your family that you'll be researching. Depending on which surname you're researching at a given time, you can organize the records that you find and the charts and forms that you use behind that surname tab to keep all of your resources together in one place. As you begin your research, you'll find it helpful to research records using library databases. There are several databases available for genealogical research, but there are 6 in particular that you will use frequently. Ancestry.com is obviously the most widely known resource for genealogical research online, and we have a subscription to Ancestry.com Library Edition, which is free to access while you're in a library branch. You can access Ancestry.com through any library computer or from your tablet or laptop connected to a branch Wi-Fi connection. Ancestry is the best overall research source for beginning genealogists because it has a wide variety of records available. It has a fairly simple and straightforward user interface and gives you a lot of options to filter and narrow search results. At this point in time, Ancestry is not available for home access. It's only accessible through a library branch. Fold 3 is limited to military records, historical items, and some census records, but it's accessible from home. Fold 3 is the main repository for military records from the American Revolution all the way through Vietnam. Most importantly, you'll be accessing Civil War records, which are often very detailed and include information about pensions, which may include genealogical details beside the service record of one soldier in particular. Heritage Quest is a great resource. It includes access to census records available for home access. It also has a collection of digital books available for you to consult in your genealogical research. So it's a virtual library available to you online. Heritage Quest also offers a periodical source index, so you can search for a family name or information about a particular location using Percy to find genealogical and historical society publications that include articles about those names or places. Newsbank is a historic newspapers archives and includes the Times-Picayune and Advocate back to the mid-1830s. You also have historic newspapers from all over the 50 states, and their dates vary based on which issues of the newspapers that Newsbank has acquired. Newsbank also offers more contemporary resources, and you're able to access newspapers across the country from the mid-1980s to present, varying state by state, from home. The historic archives are only accessible within the library branch, but Newsbank is accessible from home if you're looking for more contemporary obituaries across the 50 states. African American Heritage is an excellent resource for researching African American families. It includes a digital copy of Black Genesis, which is essentially the Bible of African American genealogical research. It outlines resources available for research in all 50 states that will support the particular requirements of African American research, and it also includes slave sales, Freedmen's Bank lists, and other valuable information to help you track your African American ancestors through history. FamilySearch.org is not a library database, but we offer support for FamilySearch.org. It's a resource that is powered online by the Mormon Church, and it includes completely free access to a lot of record collections that are second only to Ancestry in their thoroughness and accessibility. Family Search differs from Ancestry.com because it offers state-level records collections that are created and archived by Mormon church members that aren't available at Ancestry.com. Some of the most important resources at the state level that are available at Family Search are probate records, which include wills and successions that include detailed genealogical information about a family, and those probate records can extend back into the 1700s and sometimes all the way up to the 1960s, even 1970s. The Genealogy Department offers classes on all of these databases, so consult the Genealogy Info Guide on EBRPL.com or the calendar on EBRPL.com, or also in the source newsletter to see which database classes are coming up next. Library databases are actually easy to access from the library's homepage. Once again, visit www.ebrpl.com to access the library's main page, and as we can see, there's a link to the digital library included on the homepage of the library's website. I'll open a browser window for you so we can walk through the process of accessing the databases through the digital library. Here we are at ebrpl.com, and as you can see, the digital library link is in the menu bar just below the top of the screen. Once we click on Digital Library, we are taken to a screen that allows us different filtering options for databases. We can sort databases in 3 different ways: by popularity, by subject, and by A to Z list. Most popular is a quick way to access some of the frequently accessed databases, including the Advocate Historical Archive and Ancestry.com. So if you're interested in accessing those databases, you can get to them within a series of short clicks by accessing the most popular list. You can also view all of the databases that are available on particular subjects by clicking the By Subject link and choosing Genealogy. Once you choose genealogy, you can see a comprehensive list of all the databases that are offered by the library to aid your genealogical research. As you can see, Ancestry.com is available, the Baton Rouge Room Digital Archive that includes extensive photo collections and historical information about the Baton Rouge area. Fold3 database is available, Heritage Quest, Newsbank, and others. If you know exactly which database you'd like to consult at a certain point in time, you can simply sort using the A to Z list and locate the database within that list. Ancestry.com is quick to access using the A to Z list, for example. You may encounter links to the databases page from other places on EBRPL.com or different websites, but I would encourage you to access the digital library from EBRPL.com's main page. If you access the digital library through the main page, you'll avoid being prompted to input login credentials such as a username or password, which will sometimes happen if you're accessing the digital library from an info guide or from another website. So as long as you're accessing the digital library from the library's main page at EBRPL.com, you should have unfettered access to the databases. When you log into the digital library from home, once you pick the database you'd like to access and click the link, you'll be prompted to add your library card number to access that database. Ancestry.com is the library's most frequently accessed genealogical database online at this point, so we'll take a moment to explore Ancestry Library Edition and conduct some basic searches and learn how to do an advanced search and use the card catalog search at Ancestry.com. The basic search will allow you to enter a first and last name, an approximate birth year of your ancestor, and any location the person may have lived during their lifetime in the search box on Ancestry.com's main screen. Once you input that information, you click search and it will pull up all of the associated records that closely match the criteria that you put in the basic search field. Advanced search is useful for narrowing your search results by adding extra criteria. You can conduct an advanced search using life event date, such as birth date, marriage date, or death date. You can also narrow a search using names of other family members, such as spouse, children, or parents. You can also narrow your search results by limiting to a particular gender, race, and/or nationality. The card catalog search is a way to narrow down record results by specific collection. For example, if you were looking for marriages in Louisiana, you can search for Louisiana marriages in the card catalog and search within that particular record collection. Let's take a look at Ancestry.com Library Edition and conduct some basic searches. This is Ancestry.com Library Edition's default screen. It's their homepage and includes the basic search field here. This is where you can input first and middle names, last name, a name of a place your ancestor may have lived, and their estimated birth year. Again, these don't have to be exact, but simply reflect the details as you know them at a certain point. Once you input all of the information, you can click search and it will populate a list of records for you. Let's use a basic search using the 32nd President, Franklin Roosevelt. Famous people are well documented, so we know we'll get some results from searching for Franklin Roosevelt. But also he's an interesting case to look at in census records because the details of his life change every census record between 1920, 1930, and 1940 as he follows his career, ultimately ending in the U.S. presidency. Franklin Roosevelt was born in New York. We can input information in the search field and Ancestry will suggest results. The way that Ancestry organizes the location search field is by county or parish, state, and then country. In some cases we will see city, county, state, and country. You can always follow the suggestions that Ancestry provides for you. You may not know the estimated birth year, but just calculating FDR's age when he was president, we know he's probably born in the 1880s or 1890. Incidentally, he was born in 1882, but let's just do a ballpark estimate to see what results we get. Once I click search, we'll be taken to the search results screen. Here we see a variety of different information on the screen. We have an edit search panel on the top left, which allows us to go back in and refine the details of a search. Below that we have a category listing, which allows us to click on any of these links to narrow down our search results to that particular type of record. So if I want to look particularly at census and voter lists, I can click on that link and exclude any other records such as birth, marriage, and death records, military records, etc. On the right-hand set of panels, we have a link to a free trial of Ancestry if you're interested in subscribing from home. But below that, we have a user-generated family tree. These are typically the first search results that will show up on the screen. Family trees are created by Ancestry.com users and are not always accurate to the facts. Anyone can create a family tree and populate it with the information that they know about their family, and that information is not always verified in primary sources or even secondary sources. So approach family trees with caution. They're often great resources for getting an overall view of your family history if somebody has already conducted some research on it. But again, you'll need to go back in and consult records and primary or secondary sources to verify the information listed in those family trees and make sure that you're adding accurate information to your own family tree. Below that, we have a list of matching records. Here we see all different types of records given as search results. The first three search results are census records. The 1940 federal census, 1930 census, and the 1920 census are the first three results, followed by a Sons of American Revolution membership application, likely filled out by one of FDR's descendants, referencing a Revolutionary War soldier that they can trace their lineage back to. From there, we see the 1900 U.S. federal census. We see a passport application for FDR, which incidentally lists his father's name, James Roosevelt. We can see that it includes detailed information about his birth date as well. World War I veteran service data, so we can tell by a quick look that FDR served in World War I in 1913. That was his enlistment date. And then we see passenger lists, New York State censuses, etc., etc. Ancestry will deliver a variety of different results collected together in your search results screen, but you need to be systematic about your research and track your ancestor backwards in time. So we recommend that you start with the 1940 census and track one census decade to the next consecutively back in time. If you can't necessarily locate an ancestor in census records, you may want to consult other records such as vital records, military records, immigration and naturalization papers, and other records to fill in the missing details or give you more information to maybe refine a search and locate a missing ancestor on a census record. Let's take a moment to look at the 1940 federal census and see what the details of FDR are at that time. Once we click on the link, we are sent to an abstract of the details from the census record. We can see that Franklin Delano Roosevelt is listed on the top line, and then we see all of the details that are listed on the 1940 census relative to him in particular. So we see that he's listed as a white male, born in New York. He's currently married, and he's listed as the head of his household. His home in 1940 is Washington, D.C. He lives on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the White House. And then we have other details, including his occupation, President of the United States in 1940, number of weeks he worked, his income, etc., etc. We can view his neighbors by looking at the actual census record. But here we have a list of members of his household. Here FDR is enumerated as the head of household. Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, is immediately below him. And then we have other people in the household that don't necessarily share their surname. So these aren't necessarily family members. So we can actually look at the census record to see who the other members of his household were at the time. By 1940, FDR and Eleanor's children were grown and had households of their own. They lost one child at an early age, so he would not be reflected in the house either. But you can click on the image preview in the top right corner to access the census record itself. Later census records, 1940, 1930, 1920, have smart previews which will highlight the family that you're searching for in yellow, which reflects the target of your search, and then highlighted in green are all of the other members of that particular person's household. Navigating the Ancestry census viewer or document viewer is pretty easy. As you can see, the mouse cursor has turned into the shape of a hand as I hover it over the census record. If I click on the left mouse button, that hand turns into a fist, which effectively grabs that record. And as I hold down that left mouse button, I can drag the census record around and view details. This is valuable because it allows you to zoom in using the zoom tool. It's a bit disorienting at first, but as you get used to navigating the census records and zooming in and out, it becomes a little bit less disorienting. An interesting thing about this census record is that we can see the enumerator's casual script handwriting listing everyone on the census page except for the president and his family, who is meticulously documented in print rather than script handwriting. So we wanted to make sure that FDR's household was clearly legible due to the historical provenance of the information. Reading the census record, we'll see a variety of different types of information: the name of the person listed in the household, the relation to the head of household. Obviously FDR is listed as the head of household, and then below that we'll see the relationship listed to that head of household. Eleanor Roosevelt is listed as wife to the head of household, and then we see Marguerite LeHand is listed as FDR's personal secretary. Elizabeth Henderson is listed as a cousin, and then we have a governess and servants listed in the household as well. Again, by this point, Eleanor and Franklin's children were grown and had households of their own. We can see gender, race, age, and marital status listed on the 1940 census, birthplace. In 1940, the federal government enumerated where a person lived in 1935 because on that particular census they were tracking migration after the Great Depression. If somebody received a job in another state, for example, the government was interested in knowing how many people in the United States traveled to acquire work. Further to the right on the census record, we see occupation and industry. So FDR is listed as the President of the United States. Eleanor is noticeably lacking her deserved title of First Lady. Secretary in a government industry. And then we see the details of the servants in the household: a cook, a butler, a maid, a valet, and then in the next household we have a U.S. government consultant, Mary L. Brown. The details included in each census decade will differ depending on the government's particular interests at the time, so every census decade, census form looks different and contains slightly different information. Let's go back to the search results by clicking the back button, and we can see that on the record detail screen there's some other options. We can send the document home, for example, if we want to store it for future access, but also the suggested records panel is very helpful in navigating quickly to other records related to the person you've searched for. So here we see an international marriage record for FDR, which probably documents his marriage to Eleanor Roosevelt. We see a Find a Grave Index, which is one of those cemetery records that we looked at in the list of 6 records types. New York State Census, quick link to the 1900 United States Federal Census. So if you're looking for a family member that's perhaps less illustrious than the President of the United States, you may not have as easy a time locating records and resources. So anytime you access a record such as a census record, you should see suggested records populate for that person. If there are name misspellings or other problems with how a person is enumerated on a census or another record, you may not see any suggested records. This field may be blank. So if you don't see anything, that's not altogether unusual. The good thing about the suggested records panel is it will change based on the context of the person whose name you select from the household members. For example, if I click on Eleanor's name, it will change the abstract details to reflect the census line related to Eleanor Roosevelt. So here we see all of the details of her life in particular on the 1940 census, but we also see that the list of suggested records changes to reflect Eleanor's information as well. Here we quickly discover that Eleanor Roosevelt's first name was Anna. And again, we see other records here. In the list of suggested records for FDR, we didn't see the 1910 census or a quick link to the 1930 census, so simply by clicking on Eleanor's name, we can access the 1930 census, and of course, she is still in the same household with FDR. Here in this census abstract, we see some of their children in the house with them as well. If we access the census record by clicking on the thumbnail image, we can see that the 1930 census includes different information about the family. It looks roughly the same, but as you step back in time from census record to census record, you'll see much different information reflected and often in different formats on the census records. Here the 1930 census has a column in which the street name is listed in a vertical column. that as we zoom into the record, we'll also see different information about the family. In particular, on the 1930 census, marital status reflects the age at first marriage. So here we see that FDR was 23 years old when he was first married, and that Eleanor was 20 years old when she was first married. From there we can do the math and decide that if Eleanor is now 45 years old and she was first married when she was 20, she was married 25 years ago, which means their marriage date was in 1905, or approximately 1905. So you can use the details on a census record to gradually come to some conclusions about certain facts about a family. Census records will also include clues to the wider context of a family's narrative. Here we see FDR listed as H.O.N. Franklin. H.O.N. is not his first name, it's a title, the Honorable Franklin Roosevelt. He was conferred an honorary degree when he was elected as the mayor of New York. So the Honorable Franklin Roosevelt in 1930 is the governor of New York and living in the capital of New York, which is Albany. And then Anna Eleanor Roosevelt's title, once again understated, as homemaker. So as we can see, from census decade to census decade, we can see valuable information about a family change over time and get greater details about a family's story by accessing different records. Here we can also see the names of their neighbors, and we see that a lot of FDR and Eleanor's neighbors were immigrants themselves from Italy, Irish immigrants, and even at the top of the screen there is a Russian Jew whose household language is Yiddish. Sometimes if you have difficulty locating a family member on a census record, you can try and search for their neighbors at certain time periods. If you can't find an ancestor, for example, in 1920, perhaps try searching for their neighbor in 1930 and see if maybe you can locate them next to that person in 1920, and maybe there's simply a misspelling of their name. Let's revisit the main page at Ancestry.com and try an advanced search. The advanced search can be accessed from the advanced search button here, Show Advanced, and that'll allow us to input different information about our ancestor. We can add Franklin Roosevelt's name, for example, and then we can add in a life event. If we don't know his actual birth year, we may be able to search by his death year or his marriage date. So if we know maybe that he married in 1905, we might be able to locate him on a census record using that date. And obviously FDR is well documented, so he's not difficult to find in any sense, but if you were searching for your own ancestor and have limited information about them, it may help you to use an advanced search and add the details that you know in order to locate records quickly. Here we can search by a location. This of course would refer to a marriage location. Below that we can choose life events, including family members. Here if we click to add life events, we can search by a marriage date and a birth or death date, for example. But under family members we can choose whether we're searching for a father, mother, spouse, child, or sibling, and add that person's first name, last name, or a combination of the two. You can even search for multiple family members, such as a mother and a sibling, by adding other family members. And then you can even search by keywords, for example, pilot with the flying tigers. So if we knew that FDR was a governor, we could search by governor, and that might locate that 1930 census record with a greater priority than other records. Here you can also search by gender and race and nationality. Clicking the exact search button will make sure that search results are limited exactly to the information that you input in those search fields, even if it's not spelled accurately. You can choose which records collections to search. Historical records will be census records, vital records, a variety of primary and secondary sources. Stories and publications, family trees, photos and maps are user-generated and aren't necessarily reflective of the facts of a family or a person's history. So you may choose to uncheck those if you don't want those secondary sources to be included in the search results. Going back to the home page once again, we can choose to search the card catalog. The card catalog is accessible through the search drop-down box. Here we can search particular records collections using these quick links, but we can also access the card catalog here. Ancestry's card catalog is a database of all the various records collections that form Ancestry's overall search database. So here, instead of inputting a person's name, we can input a name of a particular collection. For example, if you want to narrow down records collections just to Louisiana records, we can type Louisiana in the title and search for Louisiana collections. Here we see we have 29 different records collections related to Louisiana in a list here. Marriage records from 1718 to 1925, New Orleans death records, statewide death index from 1900 to 1949. This indicates that death records in some parishes were kept as early as 1900. Some areas were not required until 1918. We have other collections including slave records all the way back to 1719, naturalization papers from 1836 to 2001, another marriage database, Confederate soldiers, penitentiary records, and so on and so forth. Sometimes accessing these independent records collections will allow you to focus your research based on the details that you've acquired about a person or a family's history. So for example, if you want to check to see if an ancestor was in penitentiary, you can search any of these record categories: correctional institution records, and here we have different convict records listed at different time periods: 1911 to 1916, 1916 to 1921, and so on and so forth. Some records collections in the card catalog can only be browsed, such as the penitentiary records, but other collections can be searched by name. For example, in the marriages 1718 to 1925, we can search by first and last name and even marriage date if we like. So there are lots of different ways to approach searches in Ancestry. If you're having trouble locating an ancestor through a basic search, try varying your search approach using the advanced search or by using a card catalog search, and see if that helps you locate records using a different search altogether. Now that we know a little bit about the basic Ancestry search interface, we should consider some of the common research pitfalls that may complicate the research process. There are 5 most common research pitfalls, although we will make mistakes as we conduct research at various stages. The brick wall is one of the most dreaded aspects of the genealogy research process, when you reach a dead end with your research and you're not entirely sure where to go next. You may at that point consider some of the possible research pitfalls that may have happened to prevent you from getting the information that you need about your family. The first most common research pitfall is jumping to conclusions. Stepping outside of the organized and systematic approach and coming to conclusions about your family can prevent you from accessing factual, documented information about your family. For example, if you were to search by an ancestor's name and consult a record that doesn't match all of the details about a family member that you know, but you accept that person's details as facts of your family, you may eventually discover that you're documenting the wrong person in your family tree altogether. So don't necessarily jump to conclusions about the information that you find on Ancestry. You'd be surprised at how many people share the same name as your ancestors and even details about their life. So make sure that you read all of the records in detail and that you document an ancestor backwards in time systematically without jumping to conclusions. Another common research pitfall is not fact-checking sources. For example, consulting a family tree on Ancestry.com and assuming it to be true without fact-checking the information. Some family trees are documented by attaching records to them, but others are unsourced completely and don't have any information that confirms the dates or events that are outlined in those family trees. So make sure that you fact-check your sources and scan those sources to decide whether they're primary or secondary sources and whether they need further information to confirm them as facts. Poor or no documentation is also another research pitfall that's very common. If you don't list the sources that you've consulted, you may remember a detail about your family, but have no documentation to prove it to be true. If you're applying for membership in a particular genealogical society like the Sons of the American Revolution, Daughters of the American Revolution, or another organization, you'll need to actually prove the facts of your family's history. Without documentation, you won't be able to prove those facts as true. So be sure to document your sources using the charts and forms on Ancestry.com. Use a research calendar, research extract, and then collect the information that you find there on pedigree charts and family group sheets. Another common research pitfall is a lack of organization. Again, you may want to start a 3-ring binder organized by family surnames and compile all of your records by family name within that binder. That way you have basic organization, so when you're looking for records that prove the facts of your family, you can access them quickly and easily in an organized location. The last of the most common research pitfalls is being closed-minded when approaching results. Remember that families may pass down stories through the oral tradition that don't necessarily reflect the facts of the events. There's a lot of tall tales and legends that may be told in a family, or a family may choose to intentionally cover up troubling aspects of the family's history. So when you encounter a record that tells you details that may contradict that family history, keep an open mind when approaching them, because they may actually reflect the truth of the family's history. If you're closed-minded and dismiss a record because it doesn't match the details of your family as you know them, you may be missing out on very important information about your family's history. Jumping into the genealogy research process can be intimidating, so if you're confused at any point by the information that you've received in this presentation, you might check out a beginner's guides. Beginner's guides check out for 3 weeks, and they outline the different types of records you'll use, how to locate them, and how to use them. We have a wide collection of circulating items, and it's continually growing, so you can always check with us to see if there are other resources that you can take home and study to refine your search approach a bit more. Some of the most popular circulating items in our collection are the 3 that you see here. Discovering Your African American Ancestors is one volume in a series that focuses on special populations, whether it's African American, Native American, Italian, German, Scottish, etc., etc. It's a wide series that covers a lot of different special populations, and we have guides available that you can check out for those specific ancestors. Unpuzzling Your Past by Emily Ann Kroom is one of the most valuable basic beginner's guides for the genealogy research process. It's very conversationally written, very easy to approach, and it will outline the research process and the types of records that you will encounter and use to fill in the details of your family's history. There are a lot of genealogy books available for kids, so the earlier you get kids involved in genealogy, the more thorough their information about their family is going to be. A lot of times family members will pass away before we get the valuable stories that they have about our family's history, so it's important to have kids get involved earlier so they can capture those stories and document them when they're young and take that with them into adulthood. You may also choose to consult a ready reference book, which expands on the list of sources that you already know about and give you information about the types of records that are held by other records repositories across the world. Ready reference books can help you find additional records that aren't necessarily accessible online, for example, in civic records collections, the clerk of courts, archives, and other sources. But they can also explain why you're having trouble locating records. For example, records losses. Courthouses sometimes burn, and in courthouse fires, records are lost. So if you can't find a marriage for a certain family member, a ready reference book will give you a list of dates, county by county, parish by parish, of when there were records losses, so you might know why you can't find a record or where to look if those records are not appearing where you expect them to. The source is an excellent resource that walks you through state by state all of the different records repositories and resources available for genealogical resource. The source book to public record information is valuable for getting information about a family after 1940. It will outline all of the different civic organizations that store records, including Department of Motor Vehicles if you need to access information about a person by consulting vehicle registration information, phone books. All of the different public records that are available to us are outlined in the source book to public record information that focuses on the 50 states. The International Vital Records Handbook is extremely helpful because it will give you dates that different states store birth, marriage, and death records from. So again, the process of standardizing vital records across the United States was not necessarily the same in all of the 50 states. So the Vital Records Handbook will outline all of the details about vital records in each state and also in international countries. You can see what types of vital records are stored in foreign countries and what dates they have those records from. You can always access the library catalog and search for information and books there. You can search the catalog at EBRPL.com using the search field, or you can also browse different categories within the catalog itself. So book lists, things like that, you can filter down using the catalog search page. More search options is also an advanced search, so you can add additional information there. Let's search for genealogy research basics. And as the results list is populated here, we see a very short list, so we can choose to broaden our search by removing keywords. You can even start out with a basic term of genealogy and then filter down using the filters on the right hand side of the catalog to search for current publications. The material type restrictions, such as a category of genealogy, you can narrow down simply to those 5 search results. And gradually make notation of which items you'd like to consult. The green check mark indicates that it's in stock and typically circulates. When it says reference only, that's a reference book in the genealogy collection that doesn't circulate. We have a lot of options available to researchers from other libraries, however, so if you find a book in our collection you'd like to take home but our copy doesn't circulate, we'll be happy to check another library for you and see if we can acquire it via interlibrary loan. There are lots of additional resources available to you in the genealogy room at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Once again, the library catalog is fully searchable and there are interlibrary loan options. We can even acquire microfilm from some libraries across the U.S. that will lend those. We also have extensive records from the East Baton Rouge Parish, including court records, which reflect land conveyances, transfers of land from one person to another, and probate records, which once again comprise wills, estates, guardianships that include detailed genealogical information about a family. Those resources are available in our collection on microfilm. We also have extensive collections of maps, atlases, federal land patents, and federal land grants, which comprise sales of land from the federal government to an individual or land sales between private individuals. We have lots of resources that will help you locate your family geographically in time, because sometimes finding out where they lived and the names of the people who owned land around them will allow you to establish family relationships that may be invisible in other record sources. We also have lots of records for special populations, including Acadians, Canary Islanders, Native Americans, and other populations. As you get into the genealogy research process, you'll be consulting computer databases through the library and also utilizing the library collection for the most part. But as you advance in your research, you may begin to work outside of the library, work into cemeteries and look at actual headstone inscriptions. You may go to the state archives to see primary documents stored there, or to the clerk of court's office to begin to browse the court records and marriage licenses stored there. Again, there are lots of resources, and we are always available at the genealogy department to help you in your research. We're very easy to contact. We are currently at the Bluebonnet Regional Branch Library. You can call us at 225-763-2283. We will be moving to the new main branch in the near future, but in the meantime, contact us at the Bluebonnet branch. My email address is nbareford@ebrpl.com, and Angelo, my associate, can be contacted at asedaris@ebrpl.com. Again, we offer a number of classes on the databases the library offers. Selected class offerings include Fold 3 Basics, Introduction to Ancestry.com, which has greater detail about searching and filtering results at Ancestry. We have a Wills and Probates class if you're interested in getting into court records and finding out what information are stored in those repositories. We also have an introduction to FamilySearch.org, which will allow you to fill in the details of your family history by using a free resource available online and accessible from your own home. For these classes and more, consult EBRPL.com. A full class schedule will be published on the Genealogy Info Guide and also in the Source newsletter. Both of those are accessible from the library's homepage. Please join us at our new location in the Special Collections Department at the main library at Goodwood on the 2nd floor. That's coming soon, so check back with us. Always give us a call ahead of time. If you can't reach us by phone, we may be moving, so you can always send us an email and we'll happily respond to you with the information that you need to begin your research or continue it and take it to the next level. Once again, thank you for attending Introduction to Genealogy, and if you have any questions, please contact us and we'll be happy to help.